Great. So guys, once again, welcome to this webinar, yet another webinar about Magento performance from Codilor. Before I continue, let me give a short intro about me, which Anushri has already done. But I, uh, my name is Rashid, and I am the CEO of Codilor. We are a digital commerce agency that has been specializing in Magento to build enterprise-grade e-commerce platforms for brands like Aldo, Reebok, Mothercare, Coach, Kate Spade, etc. Pretty much in the Middle East and Southeast Asia regions. And performance in Magento has been one of my passionate areas, which I've been focusing on in the last many years. Okay. So before we jump into talking about tuning Magento, it's always really good to understand where does the performance issues in Magento come from. All right. So the first point about Magento is that it is open source and flexible, right? So what that means is if you are a Magento developer, you basically get access to each and every line of code because it's open source. And as a developer, you can pretty much change the behavior of Magento by making any sort of modifications that you imagine, right? Now that means that if you are an inexperienced developer, you could uh, end up making changes in the wrong places in the wrong ways, which could lead to performance issues. Now the second reason is that Magento is one of the most comprehensive e-commerce platforms out there. It has almost everything that every feature that you can imagine an e-commerce website could have, right? And I think compared to even Shopify or a lot of other popular platforms, it's sort of complete, right? Now what that means is that Magento as a platform comes with lots and lots of modules, which means that there are hundreds of thousands of lines of code that execute gets executed to basically show any page on the website, right? So that also can lead to performance issues. And the third point is that with regards to how you host your site, you have ultimate freedom, right? So you can uh, host in your office server room, you can host in AWS cloud, you can host in the shared hosting, VPS hosting. So with regards to where your site is living, that's you have total freedom. Now that also means that if your servers do not have the right resources, or it's not configured properly, that also can lead to performance issues. So in short, while these points are could be the reason why Magento has performance issues, but these are also the reasons why me and some of you sitting here really love Magento for, right? So now most of these performance issues has been discussed multiple times at multiple conferences and webinars and all that. And there are a lot of solutions that we already know of. So depending on whom you are talking to, you are mostly going to be suggested one of the solutions if you are a merchant and you're suffering from performance issues. So in my experience, what I have seen is that when a merchant faces performance issues on their Magento website, and they talk to, let's say, a consultant or an agency, uh, they're going to get suggested any of this, right? And they take a decision without really understanding the full implications of what any of the solutions can bring. So uh, there are cases when you choose any solution, what happens is that maybe your performance will increase, but what was working before that, right, that can stop working. So it could mess up things. So it's very good to understand uh, these solutions, basically what all pros and cons it has. So that's what we're going to do right now. So the first one is progressive web app. So here by progressive web app, what I'm meaning is that the headless decoupled front end and a back end, right? So ideally, I mean, from Google's definition of progressive web app, that is not a mandatory thing. But in the Magento ecosystem, when anybody refers to PWA, they actually mean a headless decoupled version where you build, front end on, let's say, React JS or Vue JS or Angular, right? So So progressive web app is one of my favorite areas, and I am also a big ambassador of that. I've given a lot of webinars and talks on PWS. So the biggest advantage of progressive web app is that it is super fast, right? Because I mean, as you interact with the PWA, unlike traditional website, every page does not load. So if you click on, let's say, a banner on the homepage, just whatever is needed in the UI, only that basically gets loaded. So the API calls to populate that data only for that section gets goes to the server, and you get faster response. Right? And PWAs are built for the mobile, so you get an app-like feel, which also improves your performance. So the PW that you see on the screen, the screenshot, that is a PW that we built on Scandi PWA, which uses Adobe Commerce Cloud in the backend. So it's one of the fastest PWAs that we have built. And the second advantage is that you get the freedom of headless, right? So if you decouple your front end and the back end, that means that your front end developers no longer have to depend on, I mean, they don't even have to understand Magento, right? So as long as they're getting the data from the APIs, they have the ultimate freedom to develop any kind of user experience that they want, right? Now, while these two things are the biggest advantages of PWS, the biggest disadvantage that I have seen is that getting SEO work is very tricky, right? So the reason is that search engine bots, including Google, even though they claim that they can crawl single page apps, it's not that a happy story, right? So because all the data is coming from the server, and when the bots hit your PWA, they just see some JavaScript, and they don't really see the data, right? So that is the reason why bots are not able to basically understand what your basically understand what a page consists of, and what data is there in the page. So there are a lot of mechanisms to make this work. So you could do, let's say, server side rendering, you could do static site generation or SSG, you could do pre-rendering, you could do dynamic rendering. But the point is that getting SEO work is tricky, so it needs that additional effort and understanding, right? So which basically relates to the point that I said earlier. So you could be a merchant who's having performance issues, and you went to PWA just to fix that performance issue, but you overlooked the SEO part, right? And you um, did not take care of SEO for PWA, and that could mean that after you went live with your PWA, your SEO could drop. So it's very important to understand the cons of each solution. And the second disadvantage is that you don't get out of the box extension support. Unlike Magento front end, right? So even though most reputed vendors are coming up with integrations, I think it's still a long way to go. And the third thing is that it is actually adding an additional layer of complexity. So before you just have one platform, Magento for the front end and the back end. Now you are basically decoupling it, and you're bringing another front end layer, right? So that needs special expertise, and it needs let's say React developers and all that. And then you have this API layer, and then you have this. So you have basically too many moving parts. So it's actually an additional layer of complexity. So in my opinion, if you are an enterprise who are seriously invested in making e-commerce win, and you have the budget for it, then I think PW is the way to go. And especially if mobile traffic is very important, and also in your roadmap you plan to really leverage the capability of headless, right? So let's say in the front end you want data from Magento, you want data from, let's say, your PIM, you want data from, let's say, your CDP, and you want to plug different points of data in the front end. That is when headless really matters. But just for performance issues, I do not think PWA is the solution, right? And the second alternative that you have is basically the alternative themes that have been recently popular, like Huwa, Alpaca, Breeze theme. So basically, what they do is they fix the limitations and problems in the Magento Luma front end, right? So advantage is that they are fast and lightweight. That is why they exist. And some of them, like Huwa, even have better developer experience. So they use less complicated frameworks like Alpine and Tailwind. So developers might find it better to work on. Again, the disadvantages are out of the box extension support is not as good as what you get for default Magento, and learning curve and talent. So while already Magento developers are rare to find, so finding developers who have expertise in this, developers and agencies, that can get difficult. And for me, the biggest disadvantage is dependency on the vendor, right? So all of these themes are developed by a particular company, um, which are small companies compared to, let's say, a company like Adobe, right? So let's say they pull the plug of further development, and we have seen that with a lot of open source and a lot of tools. Like, so then what do you do? So that is also a question that you'll have to answer. But again, I think for smaller stores, which with lesser investment, I think alternative themes like this are a great solution, because you could save on your cost on hosting and all that, because it consumes less resources. Just check my time. Okay. Now the third solution, which is my favorite, is Adobe Commerce Cloud. So the biggest advantage of Adobe Commerce Cloud is that you are bound to get high performance. That is because the infrastructure is given by them, which is powered by Fastly, Varnish. You get Neuralink performance monitoring tools, and a lot of other things. So just because you are on Adobe Commerce Cloud under the infra, that gets you access to a lot of performance boost by default, even though the code base is same, right? And it's fully managed. The only downside is that you have to pay a license fee. But I think compared to other platforms like SAP Hybris and Salesforce Commerce Cloud, this is, this is the cheapest enterprise grade platform that you will get. So if you are an enterprise and if you can really afford Adobe Commerce Cloud, I think that is a great solution. And the fourth thing is that, again, depending on who you talk to, they might tell you to rebuild your entire site once again on Magento, or they might tell you to re-platform it. You are getting to unknown territory. So the problem with all of the solution is that all of these are very high effort. So if you are a merchant, uh, yeah, so talking about some data, right? So there are about 10,000 Magento websites today in the world, which come under top 1 million rank, right? So about top 1 million, I think they would not be serious e-commerce websites. So out of this 10,000, at least 8,000 websites do not use any of the solution that we just discussed. They do not use a PWA or a alternative theme, or they do not use Adobe Commerce Cloud, right? So for these 8,000 merchants, when they, let's say, face performance issues, right? And if they have to take one of the solutions, this is going to be high effort, right? You have to shell a lot of money and you have to spend a lot of time, which is why I wanted to actually give a talk about tuning Magento to unbelievable speeds with minimal effort. So that is the talk I am going to give, and I have not started my talk yet. So let's jump in straight. All right. So before we go in, it's very um, important to understand what are the bottlenecks in Magento. So let's just take the journey of a user when he tries to visit, let's say, a Magento website, and let's understand what are the key areas of bottleneck, right? So let's say you are a user and you're going to abcstore.com/t-shirts. So what happens is that let's say I'm doing it. So there is an HTTP request that travels from my computer to, let's say, wherever the server is located. So I'm right now in India, and let's say the server is located in US, right? So my request has to travel to there. So what it does is a lot of hops to various networks and reaches that server, right? Now that server understands, okay, what am I requesting for? So I'm requesting for abcstore.com/t-shirts, right? So it's a PLP page that they have to show. Now that server, what it does is it makes calls to the databases, and various calls are made, and the data is collected. Now that data has to be rendered into HTML, right? So your layout files and all the other theming files, hundreds of thousands of lines of code is executed, and finally an HTML document is produced by the server, right? Now that server travels back to me, to my computer, through all of these networks. So that's how a basic web request works, right? Now, after that HTML document reaches my website, my computer or my browser, I'm still not able to interact with it, because let's say the HTML document comes to the browser. That's going to be around for an average Magento website, it's going to be around 2000 to 3000 lines of HTML code. Now that each line of code might reference to, let's say, external other images and CSS and JS and whatever, right? So again, a lot of requests are, done to fetch all of these assets, and your HTML, CSS, JavaScript has to be, parsed and rendered, and then you're able to interact with the website, right? So for easier understanding, let's divide the flow or the performance into two. So one is the backend performance, where the server has to generate the HTML document by running through all those lines of codes and making database calls. And the other one is after the HTML document reaches your computer, till the time you're able to interact with the website, right? So the images are being loaded, the CSS files are loaded, and everything is processed. So let's divide into these two. So these two are the major bottlenecks, right? Now the backend performance is measured by TTFB. TTFB means time to first byte. So since your request, from the time when your request is generated from your browser and it goes to the server, and the time the server takes to generate the HTML document, and the HTML document comes back to your laptop, and the first byte is downloaded by the computer, that is called time to first byte. So that basically uh, will show you the performance of your backend. Now that can include your code base, it can include your DB, it can include your server infrastructure. So if you have problems in any of these things, your TTFB will be very high, right? Now once your HTML document comes to the browser, and then measuring that is actually very difficult, because you cannot quantify the performance that a user is facing, right? So let's say I'm a user and the website is being loaded, and things are being shifted here and there, and some images are loaded. So there is no one number that you can really rely upon. That is why Google Page Speed measures came up with the core web vitals, which sort of will give you an understanding of how the user is feeling. Okay, so I think we're short on time, so I'll just move quickly. So in Magento, the average time to first byte is around 1 second to 3 seconds, right? Which is very huge. So we are saying that the for the request to go to the server and the response to start coming, right? It takes 3 seconds. Now, after that, your page, I mean, your images and your videos and everything has to get downloaded, and your JavaScript has to get executed. Only then you'll be able to interact with the website. So the 3 seconds is gone at the server side, right? So that, which is huge. Plus maybe another 5 or 6 seconds. So you're talking about 10 seconds to interact with the page, which is very high. Right. So there are solutions for it, and most of the merchants are using it. So the first one is you have to use a full page cache or varnish. So what that does is, as most of you might know, if you're not using varnish or FPC, that is a crime. You should not have a Magento site without using varnish, in my opinion. So yeah, so basically the request abcsu.com goes so initially it used to go to the server directly. Now what we have done is we have kept a varnish just before the server. It's a reverse proxy. So all the requests now go to varnish. Varnish will check if it has a response to this website already, right? If it does not have, the request is passed to the server. Now server has to take 3 seconds to generate the HTML code. That HTML code is sort of saved in varnish. A copy is taken, so that next time a user requests for the same page, varnish basically says, okay, I have a copy, just take it. There is no processing. So even if your Magento code is very bad, if your server has no resources, if your DB is huge, none of them matters, because already varnish has a final copy and just giving it to you, right? So that can drop your TTFB from 3 seconds to anywhere between 100 milliseconds to 300 milliseconds, which is like 10 times boost, right? So this is something that most merchants use. But here, one more problem is that, let's say I'm sitting in India and the varnish server is in US, right? So it still takes a lot of time for the request to travel through all of these networks and to reach US and come back, right? That's because India is very far from US. To solve that problem, we have varnish on the edge, right? So you most of you know what a CDN is. So in this kind of setup, what happens is that you have varnish servers across the globe, right? So there could be a varnish server in India, there could be one in US, and let's say it's a CDN network, and at every cities you have one varnish server. So let's say if I am requesting for a page, abcstore.com t-shirt, the request first goes to the varnish server near to me. Okay, so then that varnish server checks whether it has that request already cached. If it does not have, then the request sort of goes to the US server, and the US server gives the response back to the let's say the India node. That India node keeps a copy, and next time, let's say another user hits from India, it gets a very quicker copy, right? So this can drastically reduce your TTFP. So here we saw 3 seconds to 300 milliseconds. That can drop to 20 milliseconds. This like 100 times boost compared to 3 seconds. Now, in this setup, the biggest disadvantage is that your cache hit ratio can really come down, because since your varnish is now distributed, and if you have traffic from different parts of the globe, the chances that a particular user's node has that same page is very less. Which is why if you use Adobe Commerce Cloud, right? So which comes in with Fastly, so they have a concept called shielding. So in shielding, what happens is that, so in the earlier example that I told you, so let's say the main server is in US, right? So we will designate a Fastly node, a varnish server in the US, as the shielding node. Now all of the requests from the other parts of the world, the other nodes, go to the shielding node first. So as you can see in the diagram, so let's say a user in Lyon is hitting the server, requesting for the page. It goes to the Fastly Paris node, then that goes to the Virginia node, then it goes to your origin server, and then back to Virginia, back to Paris, and back to. So the copies are saved here plus here, which is Virginia plus Paris. So next time a user in Washington DC hits, uh, it obviously goes to Virginia, because that could be the nearest. But let's say somebody in Tokyo hits, right? So it goes to Tokyo and it goes to Virginia. So Virginia already has that page, right? So this way, the load on the origin server can be drastically reduced, because you are saying that uh, another varnish server closer to the origin be the shield. Okay, so whatever you don't have, only pass those requests to me. So that is something that comes by default with Fastly, and if you set it up rightly with the Adobe Commerce engineers, this, if you're on Adobe Commerce already, you already have it. Okay, now the biggest problem is that Magento is an e-commerce store, right? And that means that, let's say I'm going to a product detail page, right? And let's say the page was cached in varnish and all that, and maybe the price got changed, right? Or it got out of stock. So in e-commerce, what happens is that every page, including your listing pages and detail pages, everything is very, very dynamic. It can get the cache can get cleared anytime, right? So which means that your hit ratio is very less. So that is why you are supposed to use cache warming. So in cache warming, what it does is, uh, before a user hits a non-cached page, if you have a mechanism to identify which all pages are not in cache right now, and if you have a mechanism to hit those pages first and warm it, that's called warming. So then, so that when a real user comes, he basically gets the page in cache. So instead of real user seeing 3 seconds TTFP, he will see a 20 milliseconds TTFP. This is only possible if the page is already cached, right? Now in the Magento, the problem is always the pages are getting flushed, which is why if you have a cache warmer, proper cache warmer, it can go and keep your pages always cached. Now there are a lot of solutions for this. There are a lot of extensions by MST, Mirasuite, and all that. And we have also built one called cwarmer.io, and this is quite different from the extension that is already there in market. So all of these extensions, they actually sit inside your Magento store, which, if you ask me, is not the ideal solution, because cache warming has nothing to do with e-commerce, right? So it should not be sitting in your um, within your Magento code base, because that itself adds additional overhead and a lot of unwanted database tables and all that. Which is why we built cwarmer.io as a separate SaaS solution, which sits outside your Magento, right? And you just integrate that with your Magento store, so that cwarmer can always listen to the Magento store to understand what pages are not in cache right now. And once it understands which page is not in cache, it just goes and hits those pages and warms it. So that's the solution. And because it is outside Magento, there are a lot of advantages it has. So in addition to context identification, so in Magento, most of you might not have noticed. So let's say there is a product detail page, right? Now Magento saves different caches for different context of the user. So if you um, hit that detail page as a guest, there's a different cache. If you hit as a general logged in user, there's a different cache. If you hit as a separate, let's say, wholesale customer group, there is a different cache, right? And depending on the currency, there is a different cache. Depending on the language, depending on the store website. So one page itself can have multiple caches, right? So let's say if you're having 10,000 products, and if you're having 5 6 different contexts like this, so the permutations and combinations are going to be very high. That means you have a lot of caches to warm. And most extensions do not take this into account, but cwarmer can hit those pages with all these different contexts, so that even if the user hits that page as a guest or as logged in, he sees the page in cache. And second thing is the prioritization engine. So again, I told you that the permutation combination can be really high. So you could be looking at hundreds of thousands of URLs or caches that you need to warm. So it is very difficult to warm everything at once, right? So we have prioritization prioritization engine, sorry, um, which basically uses a hybrid of manual priority plus automatic intelligent prioritization, and it is going to warm the pages which users are most likely to hit. And the third advantage is that there is multi-geo warming, so you can, so in this varnish on the edge setup, right? So let's say you have varnish servers in different parts of the world. So using cwarmer, you can have cwarmer bots in all of these locations, and they can warm these specific uh, varnish node separately, which is impossible if if your cache warmer is sitting inside Magento, because it has to send requests from India, it has to send requests from US and France and all that, right? So that is something which you can do with cwarmer. And it's fully SaaS; it does not change any of your behavior in Magento. Okay, so I think, yeah, we're running a short on time, so I can show you a demo of uh, all these things that I just showed. So let's see how a website, let's see the TTFB of a page which does not have varnish. So you can see, yeah. So we are using Google Chrome's developer tools. So in the network tab, you can see what is the TTFB of any page that you request. So we are trying out this on one of our client's demo website. Okay, let me just. So this is a website that is not using it. So you can see that homepage has taken 623 milliseconds to load. And let's go to a category page. So here you can see it has taken about 2.39 seconds. Okay, that is a TTFB. Now let's see the demo of the same store with varnish and warming enabled. Okay. So yeah, we are hitting the page. Okay, it is loaded quickly. So you can see the TTFB here is 210. So from 600 milliseconds, it's come down to 200 seconds, 3 times for the home page. But here you can see for the listing page, instead of 2.4 seconds, it has become 200 milliseconds. So you've got about 10 times, more than 10 times increase in speed. This is with varnish, with warming, but this is not varnish on the edge or fastly varnish. Now let's see a demo of fastly varnish. So this is a client of ours, Carter's UAE. So you can see how fast the website is loading. So as soon as I click It just loads in a fraction of a second. Yeah. So here we are looking at the TTFB. So I'm going to refresh the page. So yeah, you can see the TTFB is 34 milliseconds. Uh, Sorry. Yeah. So for the previous demo, we saw it was about 200 milliseconds. That has dropped down to 34 milliseconds. Now you can see a listing page. So here the TTFB is 34 milliseconds. So that is a kind of speed which Varnish on the edge can get you. Okay, so we are done with backend performance. So we just learned that by using proper setup of varnish and or varnish on the edge, and by having a simple warming system, you can pretty much increase the speed, increase the TTFB speed up to 100 times. This is very, very minimal effort. You don't have to change many lines of code, right? It's a very simple implementation that you have to do. And most of the merchants already have varnish. So it's you just have to what you just have to do is, implement a proper cache warmer. So let's go to the second part, which is the front end performance. So here also, there are a lot of things that you can do in the front end to increase the performance, but all of them are very, very high effort, right? Because you will have to re-engineer the front end, you will have to change the JavaScript that is there in your front end and all that. But we are going to discuss a simple thing that can have drastic impact on your performance. So that is nothing but image optimization, and the reason is because in e-commerce, if you see 20 to 50% of the total number of requests are images. So if you go to PDP, you have a lot of images. There are product images, there are related products. If you go to PLP, it's all products. If you go to homepage, and it's hundreds of banners and all that. So all images, right? And images are the most size consuming asset on your page, right? So if you are able to control or optimize one image delivery and one image size, your front end performance can have a very, very drastic impact. And to do this, you don't have to do any not much of code changes. It's very, very minimal. So first is image delivery. So image delivery means, where does the image come from? So if I am sitting in India, and if my website has a request for 100 images, and if all those 100 images, the request has to travel to US, that's actually going to take a lot of time, right? Unwanted hops, and the latency is going to be very high. So that's why people use CDN, so that all these assets are distributed across the world, and depending on where the user is requesting it for, it gets from the nearest node. So this is a no-brainer, and pretty much an old solution which everybody is using. But I just wrote it because delivery has to be controlled. So now what you need to optimize is the image size reduction. So there are two things that you can do here. One is the format. So instead of using, let's say, JPEG or PNG, use a WebP or AVIF, and you don't have to automatically use it. So you can use solutions like gumlet.com or imageengine.io. So what that does is you just have to put some piece of code in your front end. What it does is, depending on the user's device and user's browser, it can identify which image format that browser supports, and it basically sends that image to the user. And also it can identify the size of the image required for that particular user. So let's say I'm visiting the homepage from a large TV. Okay, so that means I need a very large image. But if I'm visiting the same page on my mobile browser, or let's say an iPad, then I might not need that, because my UI would have changed, and a large banner would have become a small card, right? So Image Engine and Gumlet, it can intelligently identify what exact image size are required. So instead of, let's say, 1080p, it can maybe give me a small 128p image. So this also reduces your page size by, let's say, 50 to 60%. So this is a great no-brainer solution, which surprisingly I don't see many merchants using it. Okay, so that's about it. So these are the two things I want to discuss in this webinar, which are very minimal effort performance optimization techniques, which most customers are not using, and something that you can use. So some tips before we leave is that always use a performance monitoring tool like Neuralink. So Neuralink can tell you about both the things. So about the backend performance, right? So what is the TTFP that your real users are experiencing? So it can show you that, and it can also show you the real performance that they are seeing on the front end. So the core web vitals by Google. So Neuralink can show you what real users are experiencing. So instead of putting your website in page speed insights and just looking at the scores, look at real users. So what are they experiencing? So let's say 90% of your users are from tier 3 cities of India, right? So even if you have a very faster loading website and all that, right? So end of the day, if their network is poor, you're not going to I mean, they're not going to feel much of a difference. It's still going to be slow. So you might have to deploy some other strategy. So it's very important to understand what your real users are experiencing. So you can use Neuralink, or if you don't have the budget for Neuralink, you can even look at Google's Crux report, Chrome's user experience report, which also shows you real users performance. And second thing is that if you're using a self-hosted version of Magento, enterprise or open source, always engage a server management team which has specialized focus in Magento, because I have seen that that makes a lot of difference. So it's not like hosting any other platform. This is serious business, right? So there is a real transaction happening, revenue generating transaction happening. So if the hosting server management company understands and wants us in Magento, it's really going to be useful. And the third thing is that currently, if you are facing performance issues, before jumping into a high effort solution, get a performance audit done by an agency who specializes in Magento performance. Look at where the problems are. Is it in the backend performance, the TTFB the issue, or is it your front end? Because if the TTFB is the issue and then you do an alternative theme like Hoover, that's not going to solve your problem, right? So it's very important to an audit and then look at the solutions. So regardless of that, the tips that I've told you, you can implement it. Maybe if you really think about it, in the next week you can implement it and get those kind of results. Okay, guys, thank you for listening. That's all I have to share. If any questions, I'm ready to take up.
Thank you, Harshit. So I think this was helpful for everyone who has attended the webinar. So if you have any queries, you can raise your hand. I can unmute you. We can have a discussion. So yeah, can we? Does anyone have any query? Ankur, right? Yes, I have enabled audio.
Hello, am I audible now?
Yes.
Yeah. So my question is, we just started using Fastly, but is it good to use Fastly image optimization solution, or are you suggesting that only, like Gumlet or some other?
Yeah. So as far as I know, Fastly has a great image optimization feature, but if I'm not wrong, they do not have a mechanism which can understand what size is required for the particular viewport,
Yeah,
right?
I think that is not there.
Yeah, that is not there. So there is no JS in the front end, that can calculate the image size and then request for that. So that is the only drawback. Otherwise, the conversion, the format conversion, everything that pretty much most of the CDNs do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But the bigger savings in size comes from this optimization, right? So that is something Image Engine and Gumlet has. But if you're already using Fastly, I think it makes sense to write some JavaScript. Actually, we have an idea to do that
Okay.
for Fastly, right? So which can just request that particular size from Fastly. So that's something we can look at. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ankur.
Okay.
So Jamin has built definitely. So Jamin, I would suggest you to reach out to us. We can just send some of the links that we have built.
Okay. So anyone else?
So I can see Ravi has raised hand.
Yeah, Ravi.
I think you have to approve it.
Yeah, that he need to approve from here his end. I have approved the audio.
Okay. I think if people can ask questions in the chat, that will be easier.
Okay, fine. So yeah, if you can drop our chat. Yeah. Yes, Ashwin.
Yeah, hi. So my question is more on a sea warmer, your new product.
Sure.
So if I understand, how it works, so it's basically, from each and every age location, it generates, all those caching requests so that, they are cached on the age itself. Am I right? Or it's some other strategy?
Correct, correct. That's a strategy.
Okay. And so basically, like based on whatever algorithm you do have, most of the time, all the age servers, they are always, kept warm. And so even for age locations, so how it is different than, shielding, how it is better than the normal shielding, technique.
So both are different, right? So shielding is just designating one of the nodes as the primary node, so that all the other nodes first goes to the shield, checks if the cache is present there. If it is
Okay,
not
but
there, it goes to origin.
in our case, like we are already, firing all those requests,
Correct.
right?
We are
So
warming. Yeah, correct.
yeah. And how do we define, like which URLs to warm, or all decisions are taken by the product itself?
So there's a hybrid of manual plus automatic. So manually you can put the priority from the tool. So you can say, this category or these products or these URLs have more priority. So there are three levels of priority. You
Hmm.
can set that, and you can choose which context you want to cache. So do you want to cache uh, guest user, you want to cache logged in user, which user you don't want to cache. So all that priority you can manually set,
Hmm.
and there is an automatic feature which is currently being built. So what that does is, CWarmer basically sits in your front end. It
Okay.
understands all the traffic. Okay, so let's say there are 1,000 requests
Hmm.
coming in a day. So it understands which all pages have been requested from what all context, which customer group, which currency, which language, etc. So
Hmm.
then, using that, we prioritize. So what is most likely to be hit next, right? So that we can sort of identify from that data. So then we ensure that which are most hit, right? So that is cached, that is given more priority. So there is a mix of both manual plus automatic prioritization, because prioritization is very important. The combinations of URLs can, even be in millions. So it's very
Yeah.
difficult to count all the pages. Yeah.
Hmm. And so in that case, say for example, if we are using CDN, right? So then still you need to have varnish on the main server, or then once you are using, CDN or a good CDN, right? Then you don't need it.
So, see, when we say CDN, right? So what we usually refer to is hosting a static asset in CDN,
Right.
right?
Yep.
That is different, and varnish on the edge is different. So varnish is basically your static HTML page are distributed
Right.
in the edge.
Hmm.
That most people do not do. So that is what Fastly Varnish does.
Hmm.
So that you can do with Fastly Varnish, or you can do with any other varnish also. But I think Fastly is best because it has that integration.
No, no. So sorry, I couldn't, express it better way. So if I need to use, say, I'm already using Fastly, then do I need to have, Varnish on my origin server as well?
Not really, right? Because Fastly itself has varnish. You'll have
Yeah.
to configure your Fastly for varnish also, apart from CDN.
Yeah,
So
and then it also, makes sense that, say for example, my major customers, they are in, say, India and Singapore, right? And if I'm using, say Virginia AWS because it's the cost effective, and CDN is already doing its job, is that a good strategy?
if your traffic is from India and Singapore, you should never consider Virginia, because that's on the other side of the world. So
Okay.
yeah, so you should choose one the shielding node, either India or Singapore. That's up to you. And India and Singapore is anyway closer. US
Yeah,
is in part of the world, so I think you should change from US ASAP. Yeah,
sure. Thank you. Yeah.
yeah, well,
So thank you. So time is up. So I hope you were able to view the feedback form. If you have anyone else have the queries, uh, can we wind up, right?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, great. Everyone, thank you for your time. Thanks everyone. So we'll be sharing the recorded one to everyone.
Okay,
Great.
thank you. Bye bye.